How's it going today, YouTube, and welcome back to Shaner's Mechanic Life. Do you have a small utility trailer, boat trailer, little camper, anything you haul your toys around in, and you got these little trailer tires on it? Well, I went to put some new tires on and noticed I had some wheel bearing play. So I figured to make a video, show you guys 3 ways to repack the bearings, 1 way to keep them that way, and also show you how to install them if you have to replace new ones. Here we go. So anytime you have anything jacked up, really, good rule of thumb is once you jack it up, give it a little wiggle, see if you feel any play. So to feel the wheel bearings, you just grab it by side to side, wiggle it back and forth, or even up and down. If you have some play, you'll feel a little bit of clunking going on. That tells you it's time to adjust the bearings. But even better yet, if it's been a while, you might want to take them all apart, clean them up, inspect them, repack them, reinstall them. That way you know you're good to go. Once you check for play, next thing you want to do is give the wheel a good spin. You want to listen to the bearing. It should be virtually silent, but if you hear any kind of growling or grinding noise, that's a key indicator that you got some bearing issues and you're probably going to be looking at replacement. Well, anyway, let's get this wheel off and I'll show you how to undo the bearings, pull it out, and inspect them. So removing the wheel is pretty straightforward. Just anytime you jack up a vehicle, make sure you're on your level surface and use jack stands. Safety first. So go ahead and rattle your lug nuts off. Pull your tire off, roll it out of the way. Now you're left with your hub. So next, you'll pull your dust cap off. You don't need any fancy tools, just a pair of channel lock pliers like so. Grab it on both sides and just give it a little wiggle. Move it off to the side. As you can see, we got some rust going on in there. Next, you want to take the cotter pin out, a pair of side cutters, or really whatever you have. If you're not really cutting it, tap it out and remove the cotter pin. So you grab like a 12-inch crescent wrench, open it up to whatever side the nut is, and you just spin it off. Shouldn't be too tight, because after all, when you tighten these, you're basically just taking the play out of the bearing. So spin it off, hold your hand over it, because when you pull the hub, the bearing might fall out, and just slide your hub off. As you can tell, our bearings are pretty rusty looking. So once you get your hub off, you can get it on a bench, wipe off any excess grease you see, and you want to give all your parts just a good visual. Even wipe off the grease, put them in a solvent tank or some brake clean or something. You want to clean everything off. So you can see that's pretty ugly looking with the rust, and even the race is all rusty too. Now you've got 2 bearings. You also have the inner. Now you need to remove that. Not too hard to do. Get a pry bar or a screwdriver, get underneath the seal, and just give it a quick shot with your hand. Just like that. Pull the bearing off. The inner isn't as bad, but you can tell. Looking a little on the war side. You look at the race, you can see some discoloring. You know, for the price of a set of wheel bearings for these, I would just go ahead with a replacement on this one. So, wipe off any excess grease out of the hub, and I'll show you how to take these races out. So to knock the races out is quite easy. All you need is a punch and a hammer. And what you want to do is reach down inside. You want to catch it on the back side of this race. You'll feel a lip. Get your punch on the edge of that lip and give it a sharp whack with a hammer. And once you feel it move a little bit, you want to just kind of work back and forth, and you'll knock the race right out in no time. So like I said, just work your punch back and forth. Just knock it right out the bottom. And go ahead, flip your hub, and do the same thing for the side of the bearing. Now you have all your bearings and races out. I didn't bother cleaning these just because due to the rust. But what you want to do is give everything a thorough visual inspection. Like we saw earlier, this one's quite rusty, which I wouldn't really trust it going back in even after you clean it. You can see its race is also rusted and discolored. This one looks like it's may have gotten a little bit warm. And you look at this one, looks like it's been sitting for quite a while. And even the rollers and the bearings, they match as well. This one is quite rough sounding. So like I said, I'm going to go ahead with the replacement. Now you may be wondering, how do you know what bearings to order? It's quite easy. When you grab a bearing, there's actually numbers on them. If you look closely here on the race, it says L44610. If you look on the bearing, see here, it says L44649. Now you can get on the internet or even go to your parts place, give them those numbers. They should be able to get you the bearings you need, as well as the seals. Best thing there. Some of them, when you clean it up, you'll see a number on the seal. But best bet is bring it in and match it up. They can measure it. So the last thing you want to do is put an old seal back in and it starts puking grease out, and you're right back where you started. So we're going to get rid of these, clean up both our hubs real well, and then we're going to go ahead with putting new bearings in, as well as the races. Okay, so now you got your new bearings and races. You can go ahead and install them. But if you decided to clean your bearings with solvent or anything, you want to give it a good spray of brake clean. You want to make sure all the solvent's away. That way it doesn't melt down any of the grease. So, like I said at the beginning of the video, I'm going to show you 3 different ways you can pack the bearings. The first way, the old-fashioned way, doing it manually. Doing it the manual way is probably the slowest and the messiest. What you want to do is get a good quality wheel bearing grease, get a blob of it, and put it in your hand. Next, you're going to grab your bearing with the wide part down, kind of get a finger or two in there depending on the size of the bearing, and slowly you want to scrape at it, pushing it into your palm. What's pushing in your palm, what it's doing is, like I said, packing that grease in there. Just keep on going, working your way around until you see it start to ooze out this side of the bearing. Work your way all the way along until it's the same way. You know, you're probably going to end up wearing more grease on your hands than you are in the bearing, but it's the old way of doing it. Now if you get a glob like that, all you can do, just put it back in and keep on working your way along until you're done. Wipe off the excess and put it on the outside of my bearing. That way the rollers are covered front and back, top to bottom. And put them on a rag. And usually I even cover them up. Last thing you want is any dirt or debris blowing onto it, contaminating that grease. That's the first way, the best way. Or you can use a bearing pack or something like this. You know, if you're doing quite a few bearings or working in the shop, chances are you got one of these kicking around. Take the lid off, plunger, grab your bearing, put it in, small end down, just like that. When you put this in, that seals it, and you basically just push down nice or hard, hold pressure on it, and then you'll see the grease come out. Just like that. Perfectly packed. And same as the manual way, you can grab some excess grease from the inside, wipe it on the outside of the bearing. A lot quicker. And with this, you know, you can be sure that every cavity is full of grease. That's too cumbersome and uses too much grease for you, or if you hardly ever repack bearings. And something like this may be up your alley. You spin that off, put it down, grab a bearing, same way as that, spin the top on just till it seats. You can see the bearing on the inside there. Next, what you do, grab a grease gun, whether it's a manual one, electric, or pneumatic. Put your grease gun on there, and you just start greasing. And same as the other ones, you just keep an eye until you see grease coming out your bearing like that. So just like the other ones, take it out, use the excess grease to lube up the outside of the rollers. And looks like there's a little bit of the blue wheel bearing grease in there. So grease up the outside, put on your rag, and cover it up. Now if you're interested or want some more information on either one of these bearing packers, I'll leave a link to them in the description of this video. Now next, we want to put our races in. Now, when you go to start putting them in, you want to be careful. You want to have the tapered end sticking out. If you hammer it in the other way, you're never going to get your bearing in there. So, once your hubs are all clean, take your race, just start it in the hole. Now, when you're putting the bearings in, you do not want to use a steel punch. Could damage your race. What you want to do is use a brass punch. That way the brass is softer, it's not going to damage your race when you put it in. So it's kind of opposite of removal, but the new ones in, just work your way along, tapping it in. Kind of go 12 and 6, 3 and 9. That way it goes in nice and straight. Now once you get it flush, you want to use a punch and go on the edge. Be a little bit harder to get a good shot, but keep working away in. Oop. You drop your punch. You want to drive that race all the way in till you see the shoulder here. You want to go all the way down with it. Keep on punching it in. Once you get it below the surface, it actually gets a little bit easier, because then you can take the edge of your punch and put it up against the inside of the hub. That kind of holds you in place. So kind of work it down. You want to drive it all the way down till the race hits the bottom of the shoulder. You'll actually hear a sound difference as you tap it in. Now once you're pretty sure you got the race knocked all the way in, what you can do to check is kind of reach underneath. You shouldn't be able to get your fingernail or anything into the groove, and you'll feel it's all the way down to the bottom. So next, as you've been installing it, chances are you got a little bit of brass shards in there. Just give it a good shot of brake clean, wipe it all out, make sure there's no debris. So now we can start loading our bearings. So So once I've cleaned out the hub, brake cleaned it all out. There's no brass fragments or anything in. Nice and clean. Get some clean grease. Usually get a healthy blob. Make sure I wipe it on the race. Kind of somewhat fill the cavity a little bit. I find that gives it a little bit extra grease, a little bit extra cooling, and keeps the water out. Keeps it somewhat waterproof. There we go. So we'll flip it over this way. Make sure there's no big globs. So you take a bearing, drop it in, make sure it's in place. Grab one of your wheel seals. You want to have the open side in. Line that up. Get a small hammer and slowly just work your way along. There we go, started. Work your way around. So it's flush with the face of the hub. Now we can go back to our trailer axle and put it on place, put it in place, and then do our outer bearing. So now that we're at our axle, same as everything else, you make sure everything's good and clean. Last thing you want to do is put all new bearings and races and seals and repack everything, only to have a bunch of dirt and grime get in there and ruin it all for you. So once that's clean, go ahead, slide your hub on. So feel it hit to the edge and just slide over the hub onto the seal. Take your outer bearing, put that in place, and then take your castle nut and put that on. Some of them have washers, some of them don't. So now you can still see the rust on there, but I cleaned it the best I could. It's just surface rust. Nothing to be worried about coming off. So put it in hand tight. Get your crescent wrench. Snug her up with your crescent wrench. What that does is puts a little bit of preload on the bearings. Make sure they're all in the right nice spot. You can back it off a little bit. Do it a couple times. Make sure everything's seated fully and back it off. So what you want to do your final adjustment, basically you just want to go until the nut stops. You're just taking all the free play out of the bearing, and then you find where the hole is in the axle. And what you want to do then is back it off till it meets that hole. You don't want to go tightening it to the next hole, because that just puts way too much pressure on the bearing. Then take your cotter pin, drop it through, grab one end, bend it up and around, cut off your excess, and same as your other side. You want to make sure you leave enough room so that dust cap will go on. Now this is the part of the video where I tell you how to keep those bearings packed. Now here is where you have a choice. You could either go with a standard dust cap like we took off, something like that. That keeps the moisture out. Or if you have a boat trailer or you go into wet spots, you use something like this. It's called a bearing buddy. What this does is it keeps just a little bit of pressure on that bearing cavity, because after you're driving down the highway, towing your boat, the bearings are hot, the grease is hot, and you back into the water to launch your boat. Basically the air inside contracts, cools, and shrinks, therefore drawing moisture in, which can contaminate your grease, get your rusty bearings like we had here. Now, you don't have to have a boat trailer to use these. These also help keep the moisture out of, motorcycle trailer, utility trailer like this, basically any kind of trailer. Now I'm going to go with the bearing buddies on this one. What happens is you put it on the hub just like your regular dust cap. You get your grease gun and you grease it up until this spring moves back about 1/8 of an inch. What that does is that puts about 3 psi pressure on that hub. Therefore, when it contracts and gets the water in, you have that pressure. It's going to keep the moisture out, and you get a lot more life out of your bearings. Here's the box that came in. What I'll do too is I'll leave a link to these as well in the description of this video if you want some more information or details. And when you go to order them, you order it by the bore size. So if you're uncertain of what you want to measure the inside of this lip on your hub and just order a corresponding bearing buddy and you'll be good to go. So let's put this on and we'll grease her up. So you put these on just like your regular dust cap, line it up, and you want to take just a plastic mallet and slowly hammer it in place until it bottoms out. Just back and forth, taking your time. You can hear it makes a little bit of a sound difference as we hammered it in. So now you can get a grease gun with the same grease we packed our bearings with, and you can start greasing. So as you grease it, you want to watch that piston. As it comes out about 1/8 of an inch, that's when you stop. Basically that fills our cavity so it can't suck any moisture or water in. And it looks like it's starting to move a little bit here. And there we go. Just go ahead, wipe off your excess. You can also get these caps. If we're going this far, why not seal this up? Just a flexible rubber cap, and you just put that over your hub. Now I find you get a better, when you push this on, you get a little bit of pressure there. I find you get a better fit. You push center in, and you push the outside in. Gets you a little bit of suction, holds it on just a little bit better. So put your wheel on, put your lug nuts on, and torque them down to spec. So I usually just run them in with my impact, just till they bottom. And then when I lower the wheel, and I go back with a torque wrench. Last thing you want to do is have a wheel come off due to the lug nuts being loose or even too tight and breaking. Like I said earlier, go around, make sure everything's torqued. That way you know if you ever have a flat on the side of the road that you're going to be able to get the wheels off. Now you're not quite done yet. After you run this for a little while, let's say 50, 60 miles, you want to go back, check your lug nut torque, jack it up, and also check your wheel bearings. Make sure there's no play. And if there is, pull your dust cap off, reset your wheel bearing load, put it back together, and you should be good to go. But it's definitely something you should be checking on a regular basis, because let's face it, you don't want your wheel bearings coming apart when you're going down the highway. It's definitely going to ruin your holiday. I hope you liked the video and found it helpful and informative. If you liked it, give me a thumbs up. If you want to see more like it, hit the subscribe button and notification bell in the bottom right hand corner. That way you get notified when I get new videos coming out. Well, that's it for tonight, everybody. Have a good night and keep wrenching.